Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series Rescue the Rockies. And want to start off this episode as we're closing in on our 200th episode of this series and also closing in on the release of OOTP 27 in less than 2 weeks by thanking all of our viewers and listeners. Really do appreciate the support of the channel over the past year and over the past 4 or 5 years at this point. As I've said on many occasions, without the viewers, I am a middle-aged man talking to himself while playing a video game rather than doing something more responsible with my life. So I do appreciate the viewership and the commentary and the feedback from our loyal viewers and commenters, also known as the Worldwide Scouting Department. And we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from the WWSD as we prepare for the beginning of the international free agent signing period. And this episode hopefully will sim all the way to the start of this upcoming 2043 season. As I talked about towards the end of the last episode, it's been a extremely quiet offseason for our Rockies. Haven't signed anyone as a free agent. We have made a few minor league contract offers to people to bolster our organizational depth at this point. One of the things that we've struggled with in recent years is feel like the roster really needs one more big bat. And I know that's probably a little greedy when you see that our 2 through 5 hitters all had 19 to 37 home runs last year. But this is 2043 baseball, not 1983 baseball in terms of the number of home runs that are being hit. And it does seem like we potentially have a gap for a corner infielder or a corner outfielder, and there are some interesting players on the trading block, so I did spend some time investigating the options there. Unfortunately, there's nothing realistic. The most interesting is the left fielder Jesus Mendoza, 30-year-old with incredible power, really good fielder, great speed, high adaptability and work ethic. He's making a ton of money, though, in the final year of his contract, so he's a pure rental, and he's really a guy who's outstanding against right-handed pitching, but questionably playable against left-handed pitching. He is a former MVP this past season, also a 4-time All-Star and a 2-time Silver Slugger winner. But the demand for the Pirates for him, as you might expect, is incredibly high and just not realistic. We don't have a ton of money available right now. Admittedly, we've beefed up scouting and player development, so we would need them to retain a big portion of his contract or cut those other budgets to make it work, but it just doesn't look like realistically there's any way to bring him on board. So we're going to go with a bit of a youth movement this year to fill our 5th outfield spot, to fill a couple spots in the infield, one of which could very well be a starter, and to also fill the last spot or 2 in our pitching staff, assuming that there's nobody that just lingers on the free agent market for another month or so and is willing to take a very small contract. So although we've had a great run over the last 15 seasons or so, I do feel like this could be a bit of a reset year for our Rockies, and hopefully we can begin working harder on resetting the organization overall with the pool of international amateur free agents that are available. And as I said, a lot of really interesting feedback and ideas from the Worldwide Scouting Department. We'll talk through those now before making our decision. Typically, in recent years, we've tended to go with putting all of our money on one big player and hoping for the best, given that our budget for the last decade plus has typically been as small as any other teams in baseball for the IAFA pool. NS1CLRK, who was great to hear from again, mentioned that they've been doing a much more broad-based IAFA approach with their OOTP 26 decisions. And Sage Dierks and Ravenspawn 3 also noted that although shortstops are seemingly the most interesting players available in this pool at the high end, that the right fielder Willie Cristobal and the catcher Roberto Garcia, who are both looking for very little money, $160,000 and $180,000 in terms of their initial demands, might be interesting to try to layer in with a shortstop, not necessarily going as broad as NS1 CLRK probably did, but still an opportunity to maybe get the best of both worlds, get a couple of players, including one of the big-time shortstops. And of those 4 shortstops that we noted at the end of the last episode, 3 of them received significant attention from the Worldwide Scouting Department, along with one other player that we'll talk about now, whether the plan was to put all of the money on one of them and hope for the best, or to maybe get a little more ambitious and try to bring in one of the shortstops alongside a Garcia and or a Cristobal. The one catcher who didn't really get any, at least number 1 or number 2 player kind of love from the Worldwide Scouting Department was Jesus Luscious Luke Lacosta, who does have a lot of good things going for him. Solid personality with high adaptability and baseball IQ. Looks like a competent defensive infielder who could also play the corner outfield spots. The contact and home run power we expect to be a little above average, average eye. His superpower is his gap power in theory, and he's got at least above average speed to help with that. The one non-catcher who did get some attention was the potential bargain, Roberto Garcia. Undercover Boomer and NS1 CLRK all had him at or near the top of their lists of options to consider. And there's definitely a lot to like about Garcia. A left-handed hitting catcher who could have incredible home run power and at least be acceptable with the rest of his ratings, while being a competent defensive catcher with a plus arm and some positive personality traits. For the money Garcia is looking for, he's definitely a tempting option to try to layer in with another player, although the fear, of course, is that you get Garcia signed, you find out that the top-end player is looking for your entire budget, and then your SOL. The right fielder, Willie Cristobal, also a bargain player. A corner outfielder who's not great defensively, not much in terms of speed. But the bat is certainly potentially interesting. Going to strike out too much and not make a ton of contact, but we think the gap power, the home run power, and the eye could all be outstanding. The OSA, not surprisingly, given his demand, is much lower on him than our scout is. Roberto Garcia, similar situation where the OSA is much less constructive on him than our new scout, who for the first time in many years, and these are real years, not OOTP seasons, is not a highly favored tools scout, and he's neutral in terms of his tendencies right now, as we're trying to explore some different things before turning the page to OOTP 27. Probably should have waited, not waited until 11 and a half months into the life cycle of OOTP 26 before aggressively exploring some of those things, but it is what it is at this point. And I mentioned that there were also 3 of the 4 shortstops who did get attention, or more significant attention, from the Worldwide Scouting Department. Alberto Lopez was the top choice of Ravenspawn 3. Really like the glove, like the high baseball IQ, plus speed, decent base running instincts, and although he doesn't have much home run power, we think he can be above average to well above average in the other primary batting ratings. Also a switch hitter, which isn't the worst thing. And he's called Hickory Bob. What could be a better nickname than that for a 19th century rapscallion? Another shortstop who got some positive reports from the WWSD was Johnny Huartarte, second choice of Ravenspawn 3, and ended up being the revised first choice of Dustin Durbin. Certainly a lot to like about him. Similar to Lopez, the home run power, not going to be great, but the gap power and the eye could both be outstanding, and he's got blazing speed to go with decent contact, and looks like a more than competent defensive infielder, looking for $2.6 million. Last but not least, Jose Martinez, also known as Shook. The negative with Martinez is that of the shortstops we've discussed, he's the least interesting in terms of his fielding ratings. Looks like a left field first base type, although, as some members of the WWSD noted, if you get lucky in the development lab, he could certainly turn into a solid first or third baseman. Not great base running instincts, but he does have a good personality. He is durable, and with the potential for well above average gap power, home run power, and eye, with the potential for a slightly above average bat, he's arguably the most interesting hitting prospect in the pool. And that is ultimately what led DLL First Base 14, NS1 CLRK, Ravenspawn 3, and Dustin Durbin, at least originally, to have him near or at the top of their recommended lists. The other thing that's interesting about Martinez, at least in terms of his initial demand at $2.2 million, it's the lowest of the shortstops that we're talking about. So there is an argument that we can still put in a pretty aggressive first bid for him while perhaps trying to layer in another player or two. I do worry, as I said, with that plan, that if you really want a guy like Martinez, or you really want any of these top-end shortstops, I don't want to say more often than not, but pretty frequently, you need to bid everything you have right at the start to have a shot at getting them, and sometimes that doesn't even work. But there are times where if you come in with a bid that's not quite everything, but you're in early and still relatively aggressive, you can get them on board. And so, though I've tended in recent years to, as I said, go with just one big bid for the guy that I really want, we're going to be a little different this year. And we're going to try to bring on a more diversified class along the lines of what Sage Dierks, Ravenspawn 3, and NS1 CLRK were advocating. We're going to shoot for it all here. We're going to... Oh, our international complex is full. Sorry, I've got to cut a few future scrubs before I can make bids on players. All right, we've cleaned up the international complex now, promoted some 19-year-olds to the DSL team for the upcoming season, cut out some guys who had very low ceilings and or personality issues, at least according to our new scout. So we are going to try to build a bigger class than normal and try to build it in short order. The lefty catcher Roberto Garcia, you'll remember NS1 CLRK and Undercover Boomer liked him. We're trying to thread a needle here, so I know some of you suggested $500,000 for an initial offer. We're going to still offer more than twice of his initial demand at $400,000. Ask for a response from Roberto Garcia on that. We're going to try the same thing with Willie Cristobal. Really like his potential bat. And we're going to offer him $300,000. So almost twice of his initial demand. And both of those guys, as we noted, were somewhat less popular with the OSS than our scout. So I think we've got a fighting chance. That leaves us with $4.6 million left, and we're going to put that on Jose Martinez, who's got the lowest demand of any of the shortstops, was ultimately one of the most popular players with the worldwide scouting department. And as I think I noted, either in the comments to the last episode or at the end of the last episode, if I had to make a decision, immediately Martinez would have been the way that I would have went. Definitely not as good defensively as some of the other players, but with a $4.6 million offer, that's more than twice what he's looking for. Get it out there now, and we've got 3 offers out. For Martinez and Garcia, they're a little more than twice what they were asking for. For Cristobal, a little less than twice of what he was asking for. And we'll see what happens. Definitely recognize this could be ruling out a true top-end player for us if we get a Cristobal or a Garcia signed and Martinez comes back and wants more money. But arguably, Cristobal could be as interesting a hitter if he reaches his full potential as Martinez. And Garcia could be an interesting catcher as well. And with a neutral scout rather than the highly favored tools scout, also think getting a few more players recruited by him, hopefully into our system, will help us hopefully get a better track on the scouting changes in 26 before we quickly turn our attention over to 27. And we got feedback from everyone right away, not surprisingly. Both Martinez and Garcia said the offer's fair, and unless someone offers them a better deal, they'll sign with us. Same feedback from Cristobal. So very frequent feedback that, hey, yeah, thanks for the offer. You're throwing a bunch of money at me. Unless somebody throws even more money at me, I'll probably sign with you. And unfortunately, the outfielder, Willie Cristobal, has apparently received a bigger offer. Milwaukee and Pittsburgh also involved with him right now. Says he's looking for $1.22 million. So given his batting profile, not a surprise that that number's going up very quickly. It's not inconceivable that we could end up jumping back in on him if we strike out on Martinez. But since Martinez and Garcia are still both in play right now, really nothing to do in my view with Cristobal until we have a better sense of whether we're going to get either of those two locked up or potentially have more money to spend and some bidding decisions to make. And some really good news as we sim forward today, though. Both the catcher, Roberto Garcia, for $400,000, the left-handed hitting catcher, who, as we talked about, was very prominent in the lists of Undercover Boomer and NS1 CLRK, as well as the shortstop, Jose Martinez, at $4.4 million, who was proposed by also NS1CLRK, Dustin Durbin, Ravenspawn 3, and DLL First Base 14, get locked up. So that is, I think, pretty positive. We've still got that other $300,000 to spend. Obviously, it's not going to be enough for the outfielder, but can definitely bring on a more diversified class this year. Garcia, as we talked about, is a left-handed hitting catcher, perhaps playing only against right-handed pitching. Could be an interesting part of our future. And Martinez definitely had one of the most interesting hitting profiles in the class, to go with durability and some really positive personality traits. And he's a guy who's only 16 years old, so a lot of room for Shook to grow. So we'll continue to look at some lower level options with the $300,000 that we have left. But I think the Martinez and Garcia combo works out well. Proposed specifically by Sage Dierks and Ravenspawn 3, and also moves us in the direction of NS1CLRK as far as a bit broader class than we've typically been pursuing. And Willie Cristobal did end up signing with Milwaukee. Ended up only a little less than $500,000. He said he wanted $1.2 million from us, so he didn't quite get what he wanted, but obviously was more than the $300,000 that we had available. We've now offered that all to Armando Baratin. We'll hopefully get him signed. He's certainly a lower end prospect. His original demand was $310,000. As you can see, supposedly we're the only ones interested in him. Maybe we'll get him locked up and make it a 3-man IAFA class. And we did end up getting our third member and final member of the class signed, Armando Baratin. Center fielder. Looks like he's got decent outfield range, a lot of positive personality traits. We only have average scouting accuracy on him. Extreme development risk. Doesn't necessarily look like the bat is going to be anything special, but it was a bit of an interesting thing where there were those two players who our scout really liked that were looking for less than $200,000, and their initial demand definitely had to go much further down to the list at this point to find someone who we could realistically get for $300,000. Not expecting that Armando is going to have the future as a major leaguer that we hope the catcher Garcia and the shortstop Martinez end up with, but you never know. And we made it to the start of the preseason, got some of those minor league offers that we made a few weeks ago signed, including a reunion with Jeff Colson, former first-round draft pick of ours. He's spent parts of multiple seasons in the majors with us. Was out of options at this point. We didn't want to continue guaranteeing him a major league contract, so we let him hit free agency, but now we've got him back on a minor league contract. So he'll definitely give us a little depth in AAA, and is certainly a guy who we would be comfortable using as a right-handed middle and long reliever out of the bullpen if we need to. With the fact that we haven't made any huge moves in free agency or the trade market this offseason, also not inconceivable that Colson could make the roster, the 26-man roster, out of spring training, particularly if we have an injury or two. And last episode, we lost a former first-round pick, who was a longtime member of the team in Derby Mahez, who we refused to exercise the team option for the final season of his contract. Similar situation with Phil Dingwell a couple of months ago, and now he is officially gone as well. Signs a minor league contract with the Boston Red Sox. The 30-year-old is wrecked physically, but still a useful bat against left-handed pitching. And if you've been wondering what's been going on in the development lab as we sit here about 3.5 weeks away from finishing things up, left fielder Tom McNeil is on track with his gap power program, but just barely. Pitcher Ryan Harville also just barely on track with his increased pitch movement program. But last year's second-round draft pick, the college pitcher Matthew Vance, is excelling and absolutely crushing it with his improved control program at this point. Hopefully we can keep that going. It would be nice to have a highly drafted college player who doesn't blow up on us in a very negative way very quickly after we draft him. And we're closing in on the beginning of spring training. Some bad news from player development in terms of Johnny Castillo, our big-time second baseman who we signed to a big extension a few years ago. Still has 5 years left on that contract, but the 28-year-old is definitely regressing in terms of some of his batting traits. Hopefully he can still continue to consistently hit the ball out of the ballpark for us. Former first-round pick Luis Escobar and former first-round pick Mike Witherspoon also not necessarily developing as well as hoped. Taking a look at the player development lab, Matthew Vance continues to do very well. Ryan Harville and Tom McNeil both on track with 1 to 2 weeks left. And Alex Gamez, the third baseman who missed the end of last year after a pretty serious injury, on track with his gap power as well. So potentially 4 successful programs. The issue is that the timing on the development lab ever since we expanded the league has gotten wrong. And you can see here opening day is set to be April 9th. It's March 1st right now, and these guys still have 1 to 2 weeks left. So I think that there is no possible way it's going to let us put everyone through a second trip through the development lab. If I'm wrong, I can easily take these people out, but I'm going to try to begin in the 2 spots that we leave open, defense and or running programs for 2 players, just so it's not another year where we're not able to do anything defensively in terms of hopefully helping our players with their development. And obviously, since we've got 8 of the premier players in our organization, either in terms of already being major leaguers or being top-end prospects at the development lab, can't put any of them through a program. So both John Jefferson and the former first-round pick Luis Escobar are going to be working on their infield defense. Jefferson and Escobar are both guys who will be competing strongly for those utility infielder, possibly starting infielder spot, and in Escobar's case, as well as a potential 5th outfielder spot. But think it's more important that we try to tighten up his infield defense at this time. So we will see if at least we can get a couple guys through the development lab in the defensive programs before these other ones finish, because I just don't think there's going to be time. There's definitely some quirk that's happened since we expanded the league and haven't been able to have the normal long program and then a potential for a successful short program for all of those same players in the development lab since we expanded the league several years ago. And we've made it to the start of spring training. Quick look at the development lab and just a few days left. Looks like we've got the potential for 5 successful programs if all goes well. Vance is continuing to excel. Gamez on track with gap power. Hirota now on track with control, although Harville has fallen off in pitch movement. Tom McNeil still on track with gap power. And Steve Wheats on track with his plate discipline program. So 5 successful programs would certainly be a strong performance for us. Still holding out hope that maybe we get to 6 if Harville has a good final 3 days. Mario Manriquez and Marquis Mensch, unfortunately, both look pretty unlikely to have successful programs. And we just got the worst news possible in the very early days of spring training here. In a year when we're probably short an outfielder anyways, the man, Kevin Roberts Jr., who is just beginning the 6-year, $210 million extension that we signed him to, suffered a severe hip strain that's going to keep him out 4 to 5 months. So the hope is maybe we see him after the All-Star break. Roberts Jr. has had a brilliant career with us, played only 99 games, or started only 99 games back in 2038, 104 on that season, 126 games in 2034. Other than that, he's typically been relatively healthy for us, but this is going to be the most significant injury of his career. As I said, certainly anticipating him missing the entire first half of the year, if not more. And who knows, at the age of 34, could be 35 by the time he competes in a competitive game again. And certainly not the start to that big 6-year extension that we would have hoped, and in a year where we're a little less enthusiastic about our prospects than we have been, losing our cleanup hitter and franchise icon for much of this season is probably a relatively bad omen for us. And we did end up with a relatively successful trip in the development lab. 3 unsuccessful results: Mario Manriquez with his gap power, Nils Mensch with his bat speed program, and Ryan Harville, who we had been optimistic about, ended up not improving as far as his pitch movement. But 4 successful results and 1 outstanding result. Tom McNeil, who is in a much better position to potentially make the roster this year with that injury to Kevin Roberts Jr., current gap power rating improved by 10. Makoto Hirota fighting for a spot in possibly the rotation and possibly just on the pitching staff in general this year, improved his control a bit. Alex Gamez, gap power improved by 15, so that could be a big benefit for him going forward. Steve Wheats, his I rating improved by 15. And last but not least, Matthew Vance on that control program. Outstanding result, although the numbers not necessarily as big as some of the others we've been talking about. Potential control improved by 5 and current control improved by less than 5. So a good, productive trip through the development lab. As you can see, no capability to add people in for the final program, so glad that we at least tried to get a little bit out of Jefferson and El Capitan Escobar, although Escobar right now is struggling with his infield defense, unfortunately. 2 guys whose chances of making the roster are certainly better than they were a few days ago with that significant injury to Kevin Roberts Jr. And both Jefferson and Escobar are frustrated with their improved defense programs. Things not going well for either of them. Still have 2 to 3 weeks left. Might as well roll the dice and hope for something. As we sit here about midway through spring training, 8-2-2 record for our Rockies. Mike Castro on the leaderboard in steals. Our top 2 starters, Leo Martinez and Jesse Hoffmeister, both tied for the league lead in wins, for whatever that's worth in the very early stages of spring training. And as we get into the later stages of spring training, some bad news and some good news on the injury front. The bad news, Josh Thomas, broken collarbone, former first-round pick, doesn't really look like he's going to amount to very much. But we did have him in camp this year after he hit .245 with 16 homers and 65 ribbies, playing primarily with Double-A Hartford last year. So his spring is over, and he'll begin the Triple-A season on the IL. But some really good news. Chris Kennedy is recovering very well from that ruptured UCL he suffered that we thought was going to cost him all of this year. Undercover Boomer's been encouraging us to sign Chris Kennedy, and I agree that it may cost us money not to give him an extension, but still want to see what he looks like on the other side of this injury. But he is expected to be 100% in about 4 months at this point, so we thought there was absolutely no chance when he suffered that injury originally that he would be back with us this season to kind of see what he looks like on the other side of it. And now it seems that it's very realistic that post All-Star break we'll get Kennedy back, probably a little later than we get Kevin Roberts Jr. back, but still should be able to see what he looks like on the other side of that injury. His demand, though, has gone way back up. You'll remember I had said it was over $30 million a year before we checked in last episode, and it had dipped down to $9 million a year. Undercover Boomer suggested we take advantage of that and sign him. Certainly may regret that at this point with the fact that the demand is up to $26 million again, but it's been apparently a very volatile number, but he's feeling a lot better about things after suffering that real significant injury. But given that he's going to be 32 soon and he is recovering from that ruptured UCL, even at $9 million a year for 4 or 5 years, it was not something I wanted to guarantee until we knew better what he'd look like on the other side. But certainly something where Undercover Boomer will be able to say that he first guessed us on this one if Kennedy looks really good when he comes back in August and September, and we could have signed him to an extension for much less. And a very disappointing injury for our future. One of our top young pitchers, Ernesto Menjivar, was in spring training with us and torn labrum. He's going to miss the entire year. The 21-year-old scouting discovery is one of the best-looking prospects in our organization at this point, and spent last year between A and high A, where he went to combine 10-0. Definitely a big bummer that the left-hander's season is over. Going to miss his entire age 21 season, and who knows what he's going to look like on the other side of that torn labrum. Looking at what our scout thinks of him, still think he could be a very useful, potentially an excellent major league pitcher if he reaches his full potential, but certainly missing a whole year here in 2043 is not going to help his development, and who knows what his ceiling is going to look like on the other side of that injury, as well as his stamina for that matter. And as we make it to the end of spring training, no improvement for either John Jefferson or Luis Escobar in those infield improvement programs that they were working on. Still have a couple of games left before we start thinking about what this different-looking 26-man roster might be for this 2043 season. And we have made the decisions on our 26-man roster. The injuries a year ago to Chris Kennedy and more recently to Kevin Roberts Jr. opened up some additional opportunities for some youngsters, and we definitely have a bit of a youth movement taking place this year in Colorado. Certainly don't think the roster is as strong as perhaps it's been in previous seasons, but we do have some young talent that could have some upside on the roster this year. Pitching-wise, our final cut was the 23-year-old pitcher Tomas Pena. He was a scouting discovery several years ago for us, pitched 14 games in AAA last year and just got caught in a bit of a numbers game. Leo Martinez is going to be back at the top of the rotation in his traditional spot. Patrick DeBonis has noted that in terms of skill, Jesse Hoffmeister has probably passed him at this point. But Leo Martinez is going to be our opening day starter for the foreseeable future by virtue of what he's done in his career. Hoffmeister, though, feel real good having him in the number 2 role now. The lefty Bob Russell, who had been our number 2 starter behind Martinez for several years, missed all of last year with a significant injury. Back this year, hopefully we'll get a solid year out of him. Kyle Campos, who we picked up in a trade with Miami a year ago, back in the rotation for us. He was 9-5 with a 3.33 ERA last year as a fourth and fifth starter for us, back as the number 4 starter this year. And we give the lefty Mike Witherspoon the number 5 spot to start. He was in a battle with the youngster Makoto Hirota. Witherspoon, the former first-round draft choice, was 4-10 with a 4.89 ERA last year. His spot in the rotation is definitely tenuous. We've got the youngster Hirota, the 24-year-old who made his major league debut last year and was solid, and Ray Salas, who was a 17th round pick of ours in 2036, who's developed quite well as long relievers making the team this year. So the 24-year-old Hirota, the 25-year-old Salas will be our long relievers. Salas will also work in middle relief. Hirota will work as our emergency starting pitcher, but feel that both of those guys are more than capable of taking over at the back end of the rotation if we have some injuries or ineffectiveness. Ryan Harville makes the team out of spring training this year as a middle reliever. Still have some questions about his control and his ability to keep the ball in the ballpark, but he gets a shot. Melvin Reyes back in a middle relief role, and then the rest of the bullpen pretty familiar. Josh Joss, Roberto Ramirez, and Jason McKinney will be your setup men. McKinney also going to serve as a stopper for us. And then Eric Schweitzer will be back as our closer here in 2043. Position player-wise, the final 3 cuts included the catcher Eric Gartman. You may remember we traded for him from Salt Lake City during the off-season as a potential option for us. He's a bit better defensively than Elliot Bedford is, but the bat is not as good, and although neither has really hit much at the major league level, we stuck with Bedford. Bedford and Gartman both out of options, so we had to waive and DFA Gartman to get him to AAA. Hopefully he'll make it there. If not, we'll hope for the best from Arellano and Bedford behind the plate. The other 2 final cuts, the infielder Steve Wheats, 24-year-old, who was a second-round pick of ours in 2040, got caught in a numbers game, and a 22-year-old infielder, Nick Dyer, who was our 4th-round pick in 2039, only played 39 games in Double-A so far, but ability-wise, he's not too far off, so would think with Wheats and Dyer, if we have some issues with the current infielders, we can hopefully mix and match. So looking at the 13 position players, Mike Castro, no surprise, will be back as our center fielder and leadoff hitter. Carlos Bear Barrel Davila, no surprise, will be back as our number 2 hitter and shortstop. Chris Kuhn, who we picked up a year ago from Washington, will be our number 3 hitter and our designated hitter against righties. Johnny Castillo is going to be our everyday third baseman and take over as our cleanup hitter, at least until KR Jr. is healthy again. Eric Mokeen back as our right fielder now, taking over for Roberts Jr. in the field and our number 5 hitter against righties. Tom McNeil, going to get to make his full-time major league debut. He did get a cup of coffee at the end of last year. The 4th-round draft pick from 2038 looks like a competent major league bat and a competent major league glove. The 23-year-old combined for 25 home runs between Double-A Hartford and Triple-A Albuquerque last year, and definitely got an opportunity to make it to the major league roster out of spring training this year because of that injury to Kevin Roberts Jr. that made his path a lot easier. Mario Manriquez, although he didn't hit much for us last year, still gets the shot to be our first baseman against right-handed pitching. Alex Gamez is going to be our everyday second baseman this year. He'll bat 8th against righties. And then Alex Arellano, the left-handed hitter, will be our catcher against right-handed pitching. So with Manriquez making the team and having McNeil around, we do have 5 left-handed hitters in the lineup against righties this year, which is a little different than in the past. Against left-handed pitchers, we talked about Castro and Davila, obviously, as our 1-2 hitters. John Jefferson makes the team. He's going to be our first baseman against righties. Castillo, obviously, still in the cleanup spot against lefties. Ted Slade back as our designated hitter against right-handed pitching. He has been very consistent over these last few years with us in the majors as a DH type against left-handed pitching. Hit 12 home runs each year. His WRC plus and OPS plus well into the positive range. Put up about half a WAR for us each year. Pretty effective home run bat against left-handed pitching, and he's held his own enough in the few at-bats that he's had against right-handed pitching. Luis Escobar is going to be our right fielder. Both him and McNeil would almost certainly have not been on the team if not for the injury to Kevin Roberts Jr. But Escobar, the first-round pick from 2039, is a versatile defensive player, and he's going to get the opportunity to play in the outfield for us against left-handed pitching. Not a huge difference between his lefty and righty splits, but a little better against left-handed pitching. Certainly we're hoping that the 26-year-old would be more than a platoon player when we picked him in the first round 4 years ago, but is at least going to get his opportunity at some consistent playing time against lefties at the major league level this year. As I mentioned, Gamez, our everyday second baseman, and the lefty hitting Tom McNeil is the one lefty who sneaks into the lineup against left-handed pitching. So he's going to be an everyday player here as a rookie for us in left. Both Kuhn and Mokeen have pretty dramatic lefty and righty splits. McNeil is a little more normal, so we'll give the youngster the opportunity to play every day. And then Elliott Bedford, as we talked about, will be our catcher against left-handed pitchers again this year. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that batting average up over $188 this year. And we've made it to opening day 2043. Charlie Monfort expects us to make the playoffs once again this year. Quick look at our minor league system. Middle of the pack, 15th out of 32 overall. Actually, that is a small amount of progress from where we were a year ago, so hopefully we can continue moving things in a better direction in the minors. 3 top 100 prospects. We mentioned Hirota and Salas, both going to get the opportunity to be long relievers right now. Could certainly see each of them starting games for us in the majors this year. Talked earlier about that big injury, unfortunately, to Ernesto Menjivar. But Matthew Vance, the second-round pick from a year ago, the number 63 prospect in baseball, we're going to start him in Double-A Hartford. He only pitched 3 games at that level a year ago with a 4.67 ERA. 21-year-old, certainly would expect that we'll be promoting him to AAA before the end of this year, and is a guy who could certainly be competing to make his major league debut before the end of the season, particularly if we have some injuries. And last, but certainly not least, let's check in on the preseason predictions. Over in the American League, the Las Vegas Athletics, once again expected to be the premier team there with 97 wins in the simulation. The New York Yankees over in the AL East, the only other team expected to win 90-plus in the American League here in 2043. To our National League, and our Rockies are expected to be the best team in the NL with 95 wins, but that's a number that's down from predictions we've gotten in many previous seasons. Expected to beat the Padres, who we've been battling with for the division title the last few years, by 6 games in this sim. The Braves with 93 wins and the Cardinals with 92 wins, also expected to have big seasons. The only 3 90-plus win teams in baseball, or in the National League this year, expected to be the Cards, the Braves, and the Rockies. And if you remember, the Cards had the best record in the NL last year. We were second best, and the Braves finished third best. So no real changes, at least in this simulation. Taking a look at the top hitters with no Kevin Roberts Jr., the only hitter expected to have a monster year for us is Mike Castro. 282 average, only 11 homers and 55 ribbies, but he is expected to steal 53 bases and have an on-base percentage over 100 points better than his batting average. Once again, expecting to be reliant on our pitching. Jesse Hoffmeister was 12-9 with a 3.04 ERA and 227 strikeouts in the sim. Leo Martinez 14-9 with a 3.44 ERA and once again over 200 innings from our longtime ace. So big expectations for the Rockies, even with some pretty significant injuries, as we've talked about. Kennedy and Kevin Roberts Jr. both could be back around the All-Star break. Catcher Adrian McCallum, who is a guy who could be in the mix for playing time at catcher at 26 years old, is recovering from a broken kneecap that cost him most of last year. He'll be back in AAA shortly. And next time around, we will not only be starting the 2043 regular season, but we'll be officially 200 episodes into this adventure with the Colorado Rockies. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.